Sorry about that. Okay, we are we're on the bottom of Ayin Hey Amud Beis. We had mentioned the machlokes between Rav and Shmuel. We'll just repeat it right at the beginning of right by the two dots, about 14 lines up. It masvina Rava Makishamasha Kolshu Kana Shmuel Amalikana Achiyim Shecheskula. Where a svina is a metaltalin, and metaltalin a kani with meshicha, some metaltalin. Svina is a type of metaltalin that could be kani with meshicha, and the machlokes Rav says as soon as you move the ship at all, you pull it at all, or you instruct the sailors to move it. Once it moves from its original spot, it's kani. Shmuel says you have to move the entire length of the ship in order to be kani. Okay. So you suggest that it was like an earlier a machlokes Tanoim that we had brought earlier. The Gemara rejected that. So now we're on the bottom of the Gemara of the block. Second line from the bottom. Lema kahani Tanoim. Let's say this machlokes Rav and Shmuel is like this other machlokes Tanoim, the Tanya. Svina niknis b'meshicha. The Tanakama says a svina, a ship, is kani b'meshicha, which is what we just said. It's kind of by moving it. Without the Mishnah, obviously, this brisa is not specifying how far you're moving the ship. Are you moving a little bit or a lot? Reb Nosson disagrees with the Tanakama. There's a machlokes in this brisa between the Tanakama and Reb Nosson. Nosson says svina v'oisius niklis b'meshicha u'b'shtar. A svina, which is what we had addressed, the Tanakama had addressed, and oisius. So let's see the Rashbam that teaches for us what an oisius are. Oisius, so the Rashbam, shtar shochayv shemoichroi oinoisu l'chaveri. It's a note of indebtedness. You know, like just like you can go on the stock market and you buy a bond, which represents either the U.S. government or a corporation has said, I'm going to pay this amount of money with a 5% coupon. I'm going to pay 5% a year or a 10% a year. So someone holding a note that says that Reuven owes Shimon money, and now Levi is holding on to it, and he's giving it to Yehuda. So he's giving it, or he's selling it to Yehuda. So in order to be kind of that star that represents a debt, that note that represents a debt, when it goes in his hands, that the meicher gives it to him. So you need for that, you need not just a meshicha, you also need shtar. Now, as you saw from the Rashbam says sheyimsaloi hameicher, even though the Haggayis v'tziyunim sheyimcharloi, and all the Mefarshim are a little put off. What does it mean? He's saying Yimser as opposed to Sheyimsher. What we're going to be talking about here is the distinction between Meshicha and Mesira. So at this point, the Rashbam seems to be indicating we're talking about when we are kind of a shtar chayiv, a note of indebtedness. You do it with Mesira together with a shtar. And the reason is obvious, right? A shtar does not have any intrinsic value. Its only value is that which it can be kind of with someone else. So it represents the right to collect something. So what you're handing over, what you're really being handing over here, it's no mashiach, it has no intrinsic value. But when you're handing it over, that's not handing over anything that has its own value. So the actual handing over of it is not enough. Therefore, Ibn Nosson says, "Ubishtar," continues the Rashbam, "Im kasav leishtar mechira al shtaros halalu." If he wrote a shtar to indicate that this note is being transferred, but if it was just a mesira according to Ibn Nosson, there's a kinyan, but it's a very not valuable kinyan, just the kinyan of the actual paper. Because the mesira itself represents the Masira, the Mashiach represents the actual object that you're handing over. That object has a little bit of value that you could use it to stuff on top of your bottle, but other than that, it doesn't have much value. So, and that you can't be kinda with just Mashiach or Masira. Come on, Mishum Hachi Boy Star Achi Iluya. We're going to go back to the star. The way it seems to say, both a svina and the star choiv, niknas b'mshicha b'star, needs both the b'shicha and the star. I'm going to say, what is a svina? What do you need a kinyan of star on the svina? Svina is a classic metaltalin. It should be kind of b'mshicha. So now that we've sort of set up the brisa, I just want to go back and talk about what these kinyanim are, right? They are essentially, we know that karka is nikna bekasef b'shtar b'chazak. And that's karka. When we talk about metaltalin, there are different types of metaltalin that have different types of kinuyim. And there really is a hierarchy of kinyanim when it comes to metaltalin. The apex, the classic kinyan, is hagbah. You pick something up. That's the best way to be kind of something. If you're buying, when you go into a store, you want to buy a vase, you hand over money, which kasef is not kind of by metaltalin, but the purchaser, when he picks up the vase, he's kind of. Then the next on the list is with Mashicha. Even if you can't lift something, you have a horse, it's not going to be easy to lift. Or you have a svina or a car. These things are not very liftable. So your next best thing is you move it, you moishech it. It's going to become clear in the Gemara. The Mashiach is not just that you cause it to move. As we're going to see, it's all going to be fleshed out in this Gemara, but there's no reason not to say it up front. Mashiach is really that you're bringing it into your rishus to some extent. Now, it doesn't mean literally into your rishus, but you're bringing it into your orbit, into your control.
By a boat.
So by a boat also, we'll see. It depends. But what really is going to be the thing, obviously you're not bringing it. You're saying like a water, you don't own it. But Mashiach does not really work in a Rishus Harabah. You have to be bringing it, as we're going to see in the Gemara, you have to bring it into a place that you have some control over. It doesn't mean really your own Rishus, but it has to be something that you have some control. As we're going to see in the Gemara, that refers to a symptom, a part of the Rishus Harabah that's not fully public. And then finally, Masira, which is the least effective. Sometimes it's what you got to do. Masira is just handing over the reins, where you don't move the thing at all. But let's say if you have by a ship, it would be, I don't know, a car would be handing over the keys. With a ship, it would be maybe handing over the, what is that thing that they spin around? The wheel, the captain's wheel? Is that what it's called? The thing they used to steer the boat. Handing over the reins is the classic example of Masira. So, okay, so we have the Samachloikas. Svina, the Tanakama says, is Nikna b'Mashicha, which the Rashbam says really means Masira in this case. Nelson says, no, Svina and Oisius, Svina, as well as a star, a note, have to be Niknas with both Mashicha and with a star. Saktumar, first of all, Oisius Mandakar Shmayu. Doesn't really, this price doesn't really add up. First, the Tanakama talks about a boat, and then Rav Nosson disagrees, and he says, he agrees about the boat, and then he says, but a star is different. But the Tanakama had not mentioned a star. So why is he arguing about the star? We're missing from the Brisa. Svina niknis b'Mashicha. A svina is niknis b'Mashicha. That was the Tanakama, and that's what the Tanakama already said. But Oisius b'Masira. And the Tanakama also said, even though we don't have it in our version of the Brisa, but it must have been there, that a Oisius, that a star chayv, is nikna by handing it over. Tanakama holds that sufficient. So if let's see the Rashbam that explains why is Oisius, why the Tanakama says Oisius are not nikna b'Mashicha, Va'oisius b'mesira. Zok the Rashbam. Avo Mashicha ein ela b'davar shegufay mammon. Only the Tanakama had said that the ship, which has some intrinsic value, you could be kani with Mashicha. But this star, which doesn't have intrinsic value, moving something that doesn't have intrinsic value, you've moved something that's worthless. It represents something. It represents probably a lot more than a ship. It represents a note that could be $1 million, but it itself is not worth anything. So moving it is also worthless. Something that's worth something. Mashiach only works b'davar shegufay mom that itself is worth something. When you're Moshechet, you're Zeicher. In order to be kinda, the Tanakhama says, in order to be kinda the chayiv, you could be kinda the piece of paper, because that's the value of this piece of paper. It's its intrinsic value, but what it represents, the value, for that you need Mesira. You need to hand it over that he's going to control it now. So that's the Tanakhama. Reb Nosson Omer, Svina v'Oisius niknas min b'shicha u'b'shtar. Reb Nosson says, both the Svina and the Balcha and the Chayiv are niknas min b'shicha b'shtar. You need both of them. Okay. The Zok the Gemara has, again, we're still fleshing out this brisa. It was not satisfied with this explanation, that they're arguing about whether you need both by Yasvina and Isius, whether you also need a star. It seems to be, Tanakama says, he's machalik between Yasvina and Isius, or Nosson says they're both the same. You kind of both of them you need both a Mashicha and a star. Right, the Gemara, star l'Svina lamali. What do you need a star for a Svina? A Svina is a classic metaltalin. Metaltali. And all you need to do is be Moshechet. If you can be Moshechet, you should be Moshechet. Elav hachikani. So we have to go for a third revision of what the Brisa is saying. Svina niktas b'Mashicha. Tanakama says the Svina is kani b'Mashicha, b'Isius b'Masira, as opposed to Isius, which have to be Masira because it has no intrinsic value. Also, I'm a Svina b'Mashicha. Svina is b'Mashicha, but Isius b'Shtar. And Isius are with a star. Now, the Rashbam is quick to tell us, Rashbam, Isius b'Shtar, Kloimer, Af b'Shtar. Reb Nosson is not saying you kind of the Chayiv with just a star. The Travali by Mesira u'Shtar Krabon and the Amil Kamal Loy Konach. We're going to see later a brisa that we're going to say is where we're going to get what the sheets are. So there's no one who holds that this star chayiv through another star by itself. You also need the Masira because it's metaltal and it's not karka that's niknas b'shtar. So you need the star as well as the Masira, as well as handing it over. So now the Gemara asks on this. Okay, so we've refined the brisa that the machlokes is that the Tanakama holds a svina is a Mashicha, and Nosson and the star chayiv, the Isius is with Masira as opposed to Mashicha, and Rabbi Nosson is disagreeing. He's saying also that the Svina is Mashicha, but he's disagreeing. He's saying that the Isius has to be not just Masira, it also needs star. So frankly, we're on this. Svina b'Mashicha. So now Reb Nosson is saying that the Svina is Kani b'Mashicha, Hainu Tanakama. So there's no disagreement between the Tanakama and Reb Nosson about the Svina. So what are we talking about the Svina at all? Let's just talk about the Isius. Why do we have to say that the Svina, that the Tanakama's Svina is Mashiach? And Reb Nosson says, Isius, you also have to have a star. But he agrees with the Tanakama about the Svina. El Derav U'Shmuel Kabeinayu. So the Gemara wants to say, so it must be, since we're mentioning that the Tanakama says the Svina is Mashiach, and Reb Nosson says it's Mashiach, it must be that there is a slight disagreement between them. And that disagreement is the machlokes that we had brought earlier, the machlokes between Rav and Shmuel, which is what the point of this price was, that a kinyan of Mashiach on a Svina, how does it work? According to Rav, we said that you once you move it even a tiny bit, it's kani. And Shmuel said you have to move it the full length of the ship. And that's also the same machlekes between the Tanakama and Rav Nosson in this price. No, the Kuli Alma Ikarav Ikashmuel. Well, it says no. Your original question was not a good question. Both the Tanakama and Rav Nosson could hold on like Rav, that you have to do a little bit, or Koshu or Kishmuel, that you have to move the entire ship. But Svunu Kilama Le Pligi. And they taka don't argue about a svina. They really hold it just needs Mashicha, the Zehu. And then the Gemara the Brisa just brought it to Rav Chadimilsa. We wanted to contrast a svina with a choy, with Oisius. Keep pligi ba'Oisius. V'halchi kamalei Rav Nosson l'Tanakama. V'svina b'adu adinalach. I certainly agree with you about a svina, that it's Mashicha. But Oisius, however, he just wants to contrast. He ek a star in, he loy. And he wants the Reb Nosson is just coming to say that you need to have a star in addition to the Masira. And now they're going on to say that this machlokes between the Tanakam and Reb Nosson is also machlokes Tanaim, right? So we've sort of moved, we've changed the goalpost. First, we wanted to say the machlokes. We wanted to bring this machlokes of Nosson and the Tanakama to say that was the same as the machlokes Rav and Shmuel. Now it's saying the machlokes Rav Nosson and the Tanakama is the machlokes of Tanoim in another place. We've looked at Tanoi that Rav Nosson and the Tanakama are arguing in this machlokes time. The Tanya, Oisius Niknas Masira, the very Rebbe. The Rebbe says that Oisius, that a star chayiv can be kani from one person to another just by handing it over. The Chum disagree. They say even if you make a star and you don't do Masira, or if you do Masira and you don't write a star, you're not kind of. So this is the source why the Rashbam said earlier that when Rav Nosson says that you're kind of Oisius b'star, it means b'star Masira, because as we see, the Chacham are saying clearly, we don't have anyone who says that you're kind of with just the star. You have the Tanakam over here who's saying Oisius Niknas just with Masira, and the Rebbe, so that's Rebbe, and the Chachamim say whether you have to have both Ksiva, a star, and the Masira in order to be kind of Oisius. So, L'chaira, it would seem to be that Reb Nosson is like the Chachamim, and the Tanakama of the original Brisa, the Tanakama Reb Nosson, is like Rebbe. So now we're saying that the Tanakama of Reb Nosson, who says that you don't need a star to be kind of Oisius, he's going like Rebbe over here, who says you only need Masira. So if he says, if that's the case, Svina Nami Tikni Masira, the Brisa before had said that a Svina is Nikna Mashicha. But if you hold like Rebbe, you should be able to be kind of even a Svina with Masira without Mashicha. Tanya, like we said, Mashicha is be'etzem a better kinyan than Masira. According to Rabbi, we see that he holds you could be kind of Svina with Masira, with just Masira. The Tanya, Svina Nikmas Masira, Divrei Rabbi, B'chab Marim Leikana, Achim Shechano, Ayachi Yiskars Mekayma. The Chacham disagree. They say no, you can't be kind of with Masira. You need to be Meshach, you need to move it. It's not enough to just hand over the reins, so to speak, of the ship. You have to either move it, which this Gemara is essentially equating a kinyan chatzar. When you have a kinyan chatzar, you bring it into your own rishus. And as we're going to see, Mashicha is also a flavor of bringing something into your rishus. Zok the Gemara, loy kash. No, it's not true. Even though, so you're asking a kasha, right? We see Rebbe holds that you could be kind of a svina with Masira. How could we say that the Tanakama of Reb Nosson is Rebbe? Because we're saying that Rebbe holds you don't need by a star. When you kind of star, you don't need a star. You could be kind of with just Masira. But we have a problem with the svina side of the equation, because Rebbe says you're kind of svina with Masira, and the Tanakama of our Brisa had said you only kind of with Mashicha. So like Kasha, Kan besimta. The difference is, when do we say that you kinda b'mesira? That's when you're in Rishus Harab. So even though we're talking about, you had asked this, and it's really a good question. L'chayra, water always would seem to be a Rishus Harab, but it seems it's not always true. Even if you have like a canal, you could sometimes have sides of the canal that are a little bit more private. So Rebbe, even though Rebbe says over there that you could only be kinda a svina b'mesira. That's talking about when you're in a Rishus Harabim, and when you're moishech the svina toward you, you haven't brought it into your Rishus at all. You're moishech the svina, but it's still, you cause it to move, but still in the Rishus Harabim. So you haven't brought it closer to you. You haven't brought it at all into your Rishus. When do we say you could be kind of svina? When does Rebbe say you could be kind of svina? With Mashiach, that's when you bring it into a simta. You bring it into a quarter of the Rishus Harabim that you have a little bit of control over, that's used for people to do transactions. And so you bring it on the side into a marina that, it's still part of the river, but it's a side of the Rishus Harabim. And the similar thing would be in an actual Rishus Harabim. If you want to be kind of a cow, you can't do it by Mashiach in the middle of the Rishus Harabim. That's a public place. You haven't brought it closer to you. You just moved it. What you have to do is move it toward you. But if you go into a side alley off of the Rishus Harabim where it's quiet, and you have the control over that area, so there you could be kind of with Mashiach by bringing it to you. So that's the two, even though we wanted to say it's l'chayra stira, how could you say like Rebbe, how could you say our Bryce is like Rebbe? Our Bryce says that a svina is nikna b'mashicha, and Rebbe says that it's nikna b'mesira. It depends on the circumstances. Mesira is appropriate in Rishus Harabim, and Mashiach is appropriate in a simta, in a quiet place that you could be able to bring it to. So therefore, how are we working this out? We're saying that which we said, the second Bryce, where Rebbe said you're kind of with Mesira, that's talking about Rishus Harabim, where you're not able to do Mashiach, Ema Seifa, Loi Kana Achim Shechana. The Chum say you're kind of with Mashiach. First of all, it's Rishus Harabim, he can't be kind of with the Kinyan Chatzah because there's no one to rent it from. And also Mashiach won't be able to be kind of. That's what we have just been saying, according to Rabbi. And Chayrid, there's no one who's going to, and we're going to bring a raya that everyone agrees to that. But Abai Rav Dami Travayu, Masira kind of Rishus Harabim, B'chatzah she'en shel shneim. Masira is kind in Rishus Harabim, and a chatzar that doesn't belong to either of them, a place that neither of them have Rishus over. So you're not able to bring it, so to speak, into your Rishus. So Masira, that's why you have to use Masira as opposed to Mashiach. Mashiach kind of besimta or b'chatzah she'ishal shneim, but Mashiach is kind of in a simta, in a place where you have some control, a chatzah that belongs to both of them. So therefore, even though it belongs to both the makna and the kaina, but since the kaina has some control over it, when it's brought into his ambit, when he brings it into his control, that can be kind with Mashiach. That Mashiach is a valid Mashiach. So you see from Abaye and Rava that, and the Chayra, this is incontrovertible, that you can only be kind with Mashiach in some place where you have Rishus. So how could it be that was saying Rebbe said you're kind of with Mesira because it's Rishus Harabim, and then the Rabbanan say Achiyim Shechana, you're being Moishechet. How could you be Moishechet? But it's l'chayra. We said it that the reason why Rebbe said you can't be Mesira is because it's Rishus Harabim. And I'm sorry, I didn't end off by Verova. Bava kind of b'chol bakam. Hagbah is always the ideal kinyan. When you pick something up, that would be the best. But like we said, that's obviously with the svina, that's not practical. So Zaktumara, my Achim Shechana. So how are we going to understand the Tanakama that says Achim Shechana? My Achim Shechana, Nami the Kamar, or my Achim Yishker, so Mekayim the Kamar. What does it mean that you're going to rent the Malkum? We said it's talking about Rishus Harabim, Hachi Kamar. Achim Shechana, Rishus Harabim L'Simta. It means until he moves it out of the Rishus Harabim, meaning Rebbe said you can only be kind of in the Rishus Harabim. With Masir, there's no Mashiach. And the Chum say, no, you can only be kind in the Rishus Harabim by being Moishechet out of the Rishus Harabim into a simta. Imrishus Bailam he like and if it's in the Rishus Bailam, if it's not in his own Rishus, if it's not in the Sharam, but rather in the Rishus Bailam, then he can only be kainet Achiyas Makaima. But Abaye and it's certainly the Tanakama that's chaylik on Rebbe. I'm sorry, it's not the Tanakama. The Chachamim. Rebbe was really the Tanakama there. The Chachamim who are being chaylik on Rebbe are just saying that you can't be kinda with Masira. What you have to do is be moishachet out of the Rishus Harabim into a simta, and then you'll be able to be kinda there. Or if it's in Rishus Bailam, you have to take it. You have to be kinda es mekayma, but you can't be kinda with Mashiach as it is now. So Gemara Lema Abai v'Rava the Ami Karebi. Gemara says this seems to be saying that Abai and Rava that say you can be kinda with a Mashiach kinda besimta. You can't be kinda Masir is kinda b'Rishus Harabim, and it seems to be that the Chalkim on the Rebbe are saying that you can't be kind of with Masir. You have to be Moishech into a Simta. So it comes out that Abai and Rabba are saying like Rebbe can neged the Rabbim against the Chacham that have been Chalak on Rebbe. Amar Ravashi, Ida Amalei Chazek Kni Hachanami. You would be correct if the Makna had said, go be machzakin and be kind. The problem over here is not that you can't do a Masira. That the Chum say that you're not able to do a Masira. Not being chaylik on Rebbe about whether you can do a Masira. Everyone agrees with Abaye and Rava that you can do a Masira in the Rishus Harabim. The problem over here is that he said specifically, the Makna said, I want you to do Mashicha. Marsava Kapeda. So one mandama who says, not the Chachamim, Rebbe, and say you have to be Moishechet out of the Rishus Harabim into a Simta, is because the Makna had said specifically, had mentioned Mashicha. So you're constrained by his specification that he wants a Mashicha, and therefore the only kin you can do is by moving it out of the Rishus Harabim to a Simta to do Mashicha.
So again, so Omar Rashi did Amalei Chazek Ukni Hachinami that what? That the one would agree that Masira works?
That you could Masira would work, right. It's not an intrinsic, it's not a halachic problem with Masira. It's just in this particular case, they're arguing, they have a machlekes about whether you could be kind in Masira. But everyone agrees with Abaye and Rava that Masira would work in Rishus Harabim. But you have a problem that the Makna over here, he didn't use a generic lashon of Lech Hazek Ukni, but rather he used the lashon of Lech Mashaych Ukni. So the Chachamim said, Eina Chanami, you have to follow out the directives of the Makna, and therefore you have to bring it into a Simta and be kind of with the Kinyan Mashicha, because that's what he wanted. So the Chacham hold it's a Kapeda, and therefore you have to do Mashiach. And Rebbe, who was Chaylik, says no, even though he said Leich Mashiach Kni, he wasn't saying, I want you B'dafka to do a Mashiach. He was saying, go be kainet. But he didn't mean to specify B'dafka Mashiach. That was the normal way to be kainet, or the most metaltlin, I guess, with Kani, the Mashiach, the most large metaltlin. But in this case, it happens not to work because it's in a Rishus Harabim. So Masira is fine as a replacement. Okay, we're going to stop over here because the next one I don't know how to stop it before finishing the rest of the Yomid, the next Yomid. So, is there a preference? Does anyone have a preference? Would you like to go learn in Kamenetz tomorrow at 6:30, or else we can learn here? I'd rather learn in Kamenetz if that's okay. Rafal, does that work for you at all?
I'll try. Sometimes my mornings are a little bit unpredictable, so if anything, I'll do from Zoom. So I'll try to be in Kamenetz.
Okay, whatever works. Because I'll tell you the truth, the hardest part for me, I don't mind coming here like 5 minutes early and